go to his funeral or anything because I didn't realize he had passed away because I didn't know him by his real name. I just knew him as
It's a nickname.
by the nickname.
Yes.
God, that's upsetting.
It is. It is.
So it's very important that we try to learn people's real name. I'm sure now at this very moment, I am the only one in the island that has ever happened to.
Of course.
Yes, of course.
Nobody ever.
Ellio, what kind of a guy are you?
Indeed. You're right, though. There are a lot of persons that carry a lot of
happens all the
nicknames.
time.
And we assume, well, we don't assume. We just naturally take for granted that that's their name. And then, whether it be, unfortunately, a funeral or some other formal affair, you see their given name. You go, who's that? I don't know who that person is.
Like, who's that?
Yeah, exactly. I suppose it happens everywhere, but it is very commonplace to your
Probably
point.
especially with your schoolmates and stuff, too. It's like, I just knew that guy is cheeky.
Yes,
That's all I knew.
that's right. That's Cheeky.
Cheeky.
From West Bay.
He's
Yes.
from West Bay,
Got
yeah.
nothing
So
but love for you, Cheeky.
I'm thinking, what is Cheeky's real name?
I couldn't tell you, to tell you the God's truth. I really couldn't tell you.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Call us Cheeky. Let us know what the real name is.
Prime example, exactly. Well, today's Thursday, and we have no guests in studios today, but the phone lines will be open at 745-2626, or you can reach out to us on our WhatsApp line by dialing 928-2562, and from there you can either share a WhatsApp audio note or send us a traditional WhatsApp text message. But we do have a guest coming up tomorrow on our Friday episode. So I want to be able to, I guess, put our listening audience on notice from early so that perhaps they might want to delay their favorite watering hole just for a little while longer as we host Miss World Cayman Islands. Miss Jada Ramon will be our guest in studios at 5 o'clock tomorrow. And she's going to talk to us about her Miss World journey, particularly having just competed in the Miss World competition that was held in India, and which, of course, represented another historical first performance for the Cayman Islands in the beauty pageant world. And if you want to learn more about what that historic first was and why it's important, well, we just want to encourage you to tune in to Straight Talk tomorrow. The show begins at 4:30, but the interview will commence at 5 p.m. With Miss World. And certainly tune in, and you can learn some, again, exciting new details on how Cayman is moving up the rankings, and this time as it relates to pageantries and beauty pageantries with Miss World. Beauty with a Purpose will be our guest on Friday. We hope as many of our listeners as possible will tune in and learn with us, but also celebrate Miss Jada Ramon and her recent return from Miss World India. That's what's on schedule tomorrow.
Sounds great. And I do have something I want to say about our discussion with Huda, but I'll wait till you go your way all the way through some of your good news. I want to mention something that happened yesterday, or something for those persons who might have been tuned in.
No, you go ahead.
But either way, and there's a second one. I got two things. Mm-hmm. But I really just, particularly for those who didn't have a chance to have the conversation or listen to the conversation yesterday, encourage you to do so. One of the things, and he chatted about many things that I thought was good takeaways, but I particularly like the fact that his focus on the intangibles, the intrinsic side of when he talked about soccer, about what motivates people. And of course, we know that there's that extrinsic motivation, but he seemed to be, in my opinion, very much focused on the intrinsic.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that you put in that person that just motivates them to want to play ball?
Yep.
And it definitely resonates with me because it's something that I shared when I was in Parliament. Like I talked about Hero Square, and you've got all of these names there, but people don't know the story. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's really what makes a difference. If you just see the names, it's going to be, okay, Austin Harris was a hero. Okay, great. Okay.
It was like what I think it was Arden McLean used to say, you know our glory, but you don't know our story.
You don't know the story.
Yeah.
But when you have a chance to know the story of someone, that is the part that's going to inspire you, knowing what challenges this individual had, humanizing him or her, letting them know, hey, I've been through that. I thought the more you know, the more you can motivate someone, whether they be young, middle-aged, or old. And that's one of the things he talked about. And, of course, linking that to some of the people that we already have, that we should be making our own heroes. You know, again, the individuals like the young man, Mr. Crooks, who's just went away and made a wonderful, Jordan, who made a wonderful representation for Cayman. Why aren't we parading this guy around? We should be giving his story and pushing it so that to the youth particularly, that's going to inspire them.
Absolutely.
You know, and the more you know, oh yeah, go on. I didn't know he grew up there. He grew up right down the road from me. Well, and then he had that challenge in school too. I'm having the same problem. And people now start to, you know, particularly again, like I said, our young person will gravitate towards that. And you put something inside of them intrinsically that nobody can really take away.
Yes.
You were like, what has got this guy fired up?
Right.
And if we don't make those local heroes, then we're going to always have to be bringing heroes from somewhere else. Because when we watch another Jordan Crooks, let's say he's from Florida, he's not from Cayman. Your Caymanians are not, they're inspired to a certain extent, but they're not as inspired because it's much easier for them to walk away saying, I'm not sure I can achieve that. You know, he was from Miami, I'm from Cayman, he went to this school. It's different. You have to be able to find a way to promote our own people and use those heroes, those local heroes, to inspire the other ones. And I just wanted to mention, not harp on it again, it was a wonderful conversation. Encourage person to listen to it. Took place yesterday, and a lot of good takeaways, and that was definitely one of them.
No, I'm glad you made that point. And certainly to Coach Huda's point, by elevating persons like Jordan Crooks and putting him as the face, giving more face time, in particular as it relates to perhaps using his face to promote sports tourism. You talked about, when there are other persons, we see these things, being highlighted in their careers. I think back to Michael Phelps when he won the world record in the 200, meter freestyle. I think back to more recently, Caleb Dressel, who won the world record in the 50-meter freestyle. These Americans, are not just the face of U.S. swimming, but in many cases you see their face appearing on commercial ads, whether they're promoting or sponsoring companies or other entities. And I think the valuable point that Coach Roy / Coach Huda made was that, why aren't we putting Jordan Crooks' face as the face of sports tourism? Investing that tourism spend on Jordan, giving him a further financial uplift for his incredible accomplishments, but using those incredible accomplishments to promote the destination, which I thought was a fabulous idea. And as they say, serving two birds with one stone, so to speak. I won't say the other
serving a good word. Also.
Serving instead of the word that we normally use.
So is it serving two birds with one bread?
One bread, yes, quite right. Well, again, if you missed any part of the show yesterday, you can still check it out.
Well, thanks for bringing him in.
Archives.
Thanks for bringing him in.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
Good. It was
my pleasure. And obviously, we look forward to continuing the conversation. I guess the next move will be perhaps reaching out to CIFA next and the president, Mr. Alfredo Whitaker, which I will make an effort to do, if not as early as tomorrow, then certainly on the weekend. And hopefully he's receptive to joining us. One of the recommendations also that came from Coach Huda, which of course we'll raise with Mr. Alfredo Whitaker if he chooses to attend, is this recommendation for a symposium that CIFA could do that would invite all stakeholders of the game of football, coaches, players, sponsors, those who have participated, and sort of get a general feel or consensus on a holistic level as to what their opinions are and how we can take the sport of Cayman football, in particular Cayman football at the national team level, to a higher level, a more consistent or winning level. I think is a fantastic suggestion. It's something that's never happened before, but it was a suggestion, and if you want to call it a feather in the cap, an olive branch extended to CIFA, suggesting that Mr. Whitaker might otherwise wish to adopt this. But we will certainly begin. We hope to continue the third part in our series with a discussion with CIFA, which, again, like I said, the invitations will be extended, if not as early as tomorrow, then certainly by the weekend, and we'll keep our listening audience informed.
So a big indulgence one more time.
Fire away.
All right, so I want to wish my mother a happy birthday.
Oh, absolutely.
And, amongst other
Should
things,
have started with that.
no, you gotta end, you gotta leave the best for last. It's
Good point.
So I want to wish my mother a happy birthday and just, again, publicly embarrass her just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I definitely want to say that my mom has inspired me in many different things. And I'll never forget, for example, when I was just about 12, she comes to me and she says, "What do you want for your birthday? You're the exact same age that Christ was right now when he was chatting with the gentleman in the temple."
Okay.
So first of all, she was aligning me. And of course I said,
died for the sinners.
sure as Christ died for the sinners. And of course I said, I want a lemon meringue pie. Now, I don't know why that was my favorite, but apparently it was.
Good choice.
And when we talk about things that we say to our youth and the difference that it makes, I'll give you one. My mom used to always say, "Ellio, you're a leader." And I'm thinking, I'm a leader. What does that mean? Why are you saying that? And I had no idea, but that's all she said. But I kept going and digging in the Bible and looking for different things and saying, "Oh, I guess I'm a leader." Mm-hmm. And I definitely think that has made a difference in my life. And I just remember also as a young person, she would show us books and ask us to look really quick at the picture. And then she'd close it and say, "Okay, what did you see?" Okay. And I'll never forget, I was working at computer services one time, and there was a gentleman there, Mr. Godfrey McLean, and he would say, "Ellio, how did you," I'd say, "Oh, there's a cable there. It's a cream-colored cable. It's BC16E-10 cable." That's actually the number, by the way. And he would say, how do you get that memory? And I said, "I guess I'd have to believe it on my mom." And I told him, and then he said, "She was ahead of her time."
She was.
So I just want to wish my mother happy birthday.
Yes.
I can't forget her birthday amongst other things because it's June the 12th, and we always used to celebrate the Queen's birthday then. Mm-hmm. Quite appropriate.
Yes.
So happy birthday, Mom. And
yes,
of course,
happy birthday, Mom.
All my other brothers and sisters and stuff are not necessarily here on the radio to say it with me, so I can say it on their behalf, but I'd like to say happy birthday, and I love you very much. Indeed. And hope that you have a good one, and may God bless you to see many, many more healthy years ahead.
Absolutely.
And happy ones.
Certainly, I do hope I'm sure the family affair that will follow this dubious occasion, this distinguished occasion.
This August.
August occasion of Mrs. Solomon's birthday. Again, happy birthday, Mom. Mom number two. And we do hope you have a wonderful day. And if I can just certainly add to it, thank you for your ongoing thoughts and in particular prayers for our program that we've started together. I thank you very much. Your mom, like my mom, is a prayer warrior. Yeah. And we certainly do appreciate that. So
we're thankful from the heart. We're thankful for all the moms, right?
Absolutely. Indeed. Well, certainly one could say we've been talking about the good news portion of our program and all the various subjects, whether it be, again, recanting and summarizing yesterday's show or ending, as you say, saving the best for last with your mom's birthday. But there's one or two items that still remain. First of all, Meals on Wheels Cayman Islands broke ground recently for on the site of their future headquarters, which will be located at 14 Durham Drive in Georgetown. The event took place just last week on the 6th of June and marked a historic moment in the organization's 28-year journey of delivering nourishment, connection, and compassion to Cayman's most vulnerable seniors. In 2024, Meals on Wheels delivered more than, get this, 85,000 hot meals across Grand Cayman, along with countless weekly supplemental groceries, hurricane emergency kits, wellness checks, and vital human interaction. I want to congratulate Meals on Wheels for certainly being a good community stalwart for the last 28 years and highlight the fact that it's more than just delivering meals. Obviously, you and I both at different periods in our life have been amongst those who have volunteered to Meals on Wheels. And on the one hand, yes, it's delivering a warm meal, a freshly homemade, home-cooked warm meal, but it is more about the interaction, the very visit that many persons who have volunteered with Meals on Wheels, they all come back and say the same thing. Whilst the recipients are grateful for the food, they're most grateful for the human interaction. Some of them perhaps not getting any other visitors other than Meals on Wheels Meals on Wheels either that day or that month. So I want to, again, express a heartfelt thank you to the very important work that Meals on Wheels has done over the years, and to certainly congratulate them on obviously growing to newer heights with the development of their new headquarters. I think it's been a long time coming. Congratulations and kudos to them.
It's the simple things in life that makes a big difference, and you'd be amazed how much a difference it makes getting that warm meal. I'm sure a lot of persons are looking forward to that. And not just a meal, but knowing it's being delivered by a caring person as well. Right?
Yes, fully agree.
Definitely want to thank them for all the things that they do.
On the sporting scene, more good news to brag about in terms of Caymanian's participation. Caymanian golfer Justin Hastings has set another historic first for Caymanians, this time in the sport of golf. The 125th U.S. Open began today at Oakmount Country Club, and our own Jordan Hastings will be featured in the lineup, or was featured in the lineup. Hastings had an afternoon tee time today with England's Laurie Cantor and Denmark's, let me see if I can pronounce this right, Rasmus Nergård Peterson. The tournament is screened on NBC, USA Network, the Golf Channel, of course, and Peacock. So whether it be Cayman fans or just Caymanians wanting to see, the performance of our young Caymanian Justin Hastings and to obviously cheer him on in spirit, you can find him on NBC, USA, Peacock, and the Golf Channel. Hastings just missed the cut back in April to make the Masters Championship, but he has since, during that time, graduated from San Diego State, and along the way, he won the Mountain West Conference Individual Championship and was named the conference's Golfer of the Year. So, again, it's a proud day when we see young Caymanians shining in the field of sport, whether it be football, whether it be swimming, or in this case, whether it be golf. Congratulations to Justin Hastings. Congratulations, obviously, are due to his family, his close friends, and, of course, the wider Cayman community. Continue to have you in their thoughts and prayers, and definitely in our hearts as we watch you go on to higher and higher heights.
Yeah. Well, I want to say, on a slightly different note, again, returning a little bit, I was just, as you saw me, greeting my mom for happy birthday, looked on the GT Cruise chat that we had, during the campaign, and just learned that Joey Wood, it's his birthday, Joey Woods.
Oh, yes.
Used to be the acting director, was there in the campaign with us. So I just want to embarrass him a little bit and say happy birthday. I'll soon be his neighbor, by the way. I own a piece of land near to him in Bawden Town.
Oh, wow.
Can't wait to go there. Just I don't care. We have to get right next to him to be an annoying neighbor.
So another castle for you in the Eastern Districts, you say, Mr. Solomon?
Well,
I know you're working on your real castle in the sky
working on
in
that
the
one.
Far East, but you can now have one, a little pit stop before you get to your
I got a little piece of land there. I bought it like 100 years ago, and I can't wait to be his annoying neighbor. But no, he's a great guy. We had a wonderful time during the campaign, and all of us there definitely developed some wonderful relationships, and I hope that continues. But he's an awesome guy. He used to head up the port. He used to be the port director at one point. Just want to wish him a happy birthday as well. God bless you. One love.
Yes.
Live to see many more.
Indeed.
And like myself, he's a bit of a farmer.
Is he?
He's got his cows and...
All right.
I said, Joey, you're not eating the cows. No, it's like my pet.
Really?
Like,
come on. And there's just one or two at Christmas time.
It reminds me somebody told me in his story in Cuba, he says you had many three-legged cows in Cuba. People just went out there and took one of the legs off. I don't know. Yeah. Joey, keep an eye on your cows.
Yeah, you might want to do that. Well, happy birthday, Joey, as well. Joey Wood.
Yeah.
Wishing you likewise many, many more happy returns, and hope you have a wonderful day. Just finally, 54 minutes past the hour of 4 o'clock. I'm going to include it in the good news category. Arguably, maybe it could be included in the substantive conversation. Maybe, maybe not. We'll just leave it there. But zero tolerance has been adopted for non-compliance with the business staffing plan. These were the headlines earlier last week. And again, I have to expressed congratulations and kudos to the incoming Minister of Labor, the Honorable Michael Miles, for, again, really firing on all cylinders. So far, we haven't really had any complaints with the actions and steps of the National Coalition for Caymanians. So I guess, as my colleague said, we're still very much in the honeymoon stage. But according to the headlines, companies that are required to have business staffing plans in accordance with the Immigration Transition Act have been warned that they will not have work permit applications approved unless they meet with the conditions concerning scholarships, internships, apprenticeship, and more importantly, succession planning and advertising where Caymanians are concerned. Failure to provide timely and accurate updates of these elements will result in the non-approval of related applications, the Business Staffing Plan Board said in a press release issued Monday past, adding that it had adopted a zero-tolerance stance on non-compliance and will not approve work permit applications where employers have failed to meet their obligations. Now, I think this is wonderful news because we have talked about it as well, almost to exhaustion, that we've had a business staffing plan. There are business staffing plan requirements. It is written very clearly in the labor law itself and the Immigration Transition Act itself. But time and time again, we see companies in the private sector flaunting the regulations or finding excuses and workarounds, and nobody really being held to a degree of account of any kind. But I'm glad to see the Business Staffing Plan Board putting their foot down, obviously supported on the policy side by the minister himself. And I think this is fantastic news, particularly as it relates to employment opportunities for Caymanians, upward mobility opportunities for Caymanians. And I think it's a good day, and it absolutely belongs in the good news category here on the program.
What's the time check?
The time check is you got 2 minutes.
Yeah, I just want to say that I definitely want to give kudos to the minister as well, but I just want to add, I think a big part, we mentioned this before as well, I think enforcement is a big deal with a lot of things in Cayman. And in terms of the business staffing plan, it is again the case where you have Caymanians that I know about at least one scenario, one case, where they're identified, for example, to be slated for a specific position, but the individual didn't even know. And it was only by accident that it happened. So if you're going to have a lot of this stuff being put down on paper and submitted to the Business Staff and Planning Board, you need some kind of a labor audit that's taking place at the same time going into these businesses and checking and confirming, do you know, Mr. Harris, that you're down to be the manager? Oh, you do know. Oh, you don't know. So if we don't do that, we're also going to have that. I'm pretty sure the minister may very well be aware, but for what it's worth, you've definitely heard it here.
Yes, you certainly did. You heard it first on Straight Talk. A number of first and even more to come. But kudos to the National Coalition for Caymanians in obviously setting a policy tone. Kudos to the Business Staffing Plan Board themselves for adopting this zero-tolerance approach and encouraging companies, to do the right thing. That's all we ask. Just do the right thing, and you won't have any problem with us or certainly not from government officials. But absolutely, this belongs in the good news category, and hopefully it will yield some positive dividends. 59 minutes past the hour, 4 o'clock is the time in studios, and we do have to pause, take a short commercial break, check in with our news partner, the BBC, for some top-of-the-hour news.
But when we come back,
we're going to take a look at HSA spending on Straight Talk, so don't go anywhere.
Bobo. How can we understand the world better?
The BBC World Service is a window onto the wider world.
The vantage point from which to survey a new horizon.
News, reports, and analysis from around the world.
Stories we think matter.
Different people from different societies.
We get to the heart of global issues.
News, stories, and global perspectives from the BBC World Service.
The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo FM.
The BBC is the world's most trusted news source.
And Bobo 103.1 is where you'll find the BBC World Service.
BBC News.
The world news from the BBC.
And the home of Cayman's most listened to talk shows.
That's right, folks. Everyone is telling their mama about the cold hard truth.
And welcome to Straight Talk. I'm your host, Austin Harris.
And I'm Ellio Solomon.
Across Cayman.
On FM, online, and on your smart speaker. This is Bobo 103.1.
Welcome to our newsroom here in central London. We place ourselves here at a little desk right in the thick of things.
OS from the BBC.
We can catch the very latest news from our colleagues, not just in this enormous room, but also from our colleagues around the world.
I'm in the room where they're treating children.
This is a combat zone.
The situation after the typhoon is very complicated.
It was a very tense situation.
OS from the BBC.
The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo FM. This is Bobo 103.1, powered by Health Services Authority.
At Health Services Authority, they are committed to caring for you. They are Cayman's largest and longest-standing healthcare provider, offering the most comprehensive range of inpatient, outpatient, and public health services at 9 different locations across all 3 islands.
Across Cayman on 103.1 FM, online, and on your smart speaker. The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo 103.1.
Hello, I'm Tom Dewsbury with the BBC World News. Air India has confirmed that all but one of the 242 people on board its flight that crashed in Ahmedabad were killed. The sole survivor, a British national, is being treated in hospital. The Boeing Dreamliner 787 was bound for London when it crashed into a medical college hostel less than a minute after taking off. Samira Hussein's outside a nearby hospital.
Around the corner, a lot of family members have assembled, and what they're doing there, it's basically the painful task of identifying the bodies. And because of how much fuel was on board and just the impact and then the explosion that followed, many of the bodies have been rendered unrecognizable. And so family members are giving their DNA. They're getting swabbed by medical professionals in this one room, because it's going to require DNA testing to be able to identify these family members. And officials say it'll take at least 72 hours for those DNA tests to come through.
The chief executive of Air India says it'll take time for investigators to find out the cause of the crash in Ahmedabad. Campbell Wilson says the firm's doing everything it can to help. US air safety experts are being sent, along with officials from the plane maker Boeing and the engine manufacturer GE Aerospace. Here's our transport correspondent Nick Marsh.
There is nothing yet to suggest a manufacturer's fault. From the footage, we know the landing gear was still down when it shouldn't have been, and the wing flaps needed for lift weren't extended when they should have been. Boeing's name is now associated with yet another tragic aviation incident. This is a firm that lost nearly $1 billion a month last year as it grappled with a safety crisis, a workers' strike, and criminal proceedings launched against it in the United States.
Donald Trump has urged Israel not to attack Iran, saying Washington's close to reaching a deal with Tehran on its nuclear program. His remarks to journalists follow heightened speculation that the Israeli military is preparing to strike. A Democratic Party senator in the United States has been wrestled to the ground and handcuffed after trying to interrupt a news conference by the Homeland Security Secretary about the riots in Los Angeles. Alex Padilla was forcibly removed from a briefing in the city where Kristi Noem was discussing the official response to several nights of unrest. This is the moment it happened.
Sir, hands up. I'm Senator Alex Padilla. I have questions for the secretary, because the fact of the matter is a half a dozen violent criminals that you're rotating on your
I also want to
hands off
on the ground. Hands behind your back. Hands behind your back.
If you let my hands go, I stand behind my back.
All right, cool. One hand, lay flat, lay flat.
Democrats have condemned the incident as outrageous. Ms. Noem said Mr. Padilla's intervention was inappropriate. BBC World News. The United Nations General Assemblies voted overwhelmingly in favour of a draft resolution demanding an immediate, unconditional and permanent ceasefire in Gaza. The document also called for the resumption of UN-delivered aid and the release of all hostages still held by Hamas. Israel and the United States were among those who opposed the resolution. The US ambassador to the UN called the paper one-sided. The authorities in Ghana have demanded the closure of more than 60 radio stations, accusing them of breaking various regulations. Prominent opposition-aligned FM stations are among those affected. The National Communications Authority said some of them did not have valid authorization or had failed to renew their licenses. From Accra, Thomas Nardi reports.
Many worry the directive could stifle media freedom. The founder of one of the stations linked to the opposition, Asase FM, explained that their license was renewed only a couple of months late in December last year. The radio stations have been given a 30-day grace period to rectify the alleged infractions. The planned closures highlight Ghana's continuing struggle with politicized media regulation, often perceived as partisan tit-for-tat between the two dominant political parties.
The number of people known to have died due to floods in South Africa has risen to nearly 80. Officials say more bodies are being found as the water subsides. Several parts of South Africa have been hit by days of heavy rain, with snow in some areas. The worst affected parts are in Eastern Cape province. The English Premier League football team Tottenham have appointed Thomas Frank as their new head coach. The Dane, who spent 7 years in charge of Brentford, has replaced Ange Postecoglou. He was sacked 2 weeks after leading Spurs to their first major trophy in 17 years, the Europa League. But the team's domestic form was poor under Postecoglou. They finished the season only one place above the relegation zone. BBC World News.
Opinions expressed on Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio do not necessarily reflect or represent the views of Stingray Media, its staff, or contributors. Callers to the program accept full responsibility for the views expressed. The show host and affiliates are not liable for any statements made or any harm claimed. All callers to the program indemnify Straight Talk from all claims. Offensive, defamatory, or unlawful content will not be tolerated. Be a part of the conversation by calling 745-2626. Now, here's Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio on Bobo 103.1.
And welcome back, K-Man, to more Straight Talk here on Bobo 103.1 FM and simulcasting live over YouTube and Facebook. We're your host, Ellio Solomon, myself, Austin Harris. And the phone lines are open at 745-2626, or you can reach out to us on our 1-800 number, our version of the 1-800 number. And that is, of course, our WhatsApp line by dialing 928-2562. And from there, you can either share a WhatsApp audio note or a traditional WhatsApp text message. We want to move away from some of our good news and feel-good moments, as we always try to do in the first half hour of every show, into what could very well become our substantive discussion of the day. Certainly this week, we have been touching on the Health Services Authority, which was certainly featured prominently in the last Finance Committee that was held in Parliament on the 6th of June. But we see also in the headlines further details, obviously, for those of us who may not have actually physically watched Finance Committee. I think the media has done a fine job of highlighting the various moving parts of that discussion. We see in the headlines today some HSA board members paid more than medical professionals. And if I may just share a few excerpts. Payments to Health Services Authority board members have increased tenfold, with some directors now earning more than full-time medical professionals. MPs were told at a Finance Committee hearing on Friday. Independent legislator Chris Saunders said that the total annual payments to board members have increased from just under $19,000 in 2016 to more than $250,000 in 2023. He said some board members are going home with $8,000 or even $9,000 per month. Some staff members aren't even making anything close to that, suggesting that the government-appointed board, in fact, are making money than perhaps some of the nurses and medical staff that are full-time employees at the HSA. But I think it's important because when we, and we spoke about this, I think, earlier this week, if not the latter half of last week, when we look at the same authority that generated $8 million in profit in 2021, but then swung to a deficit or a loss position in 2023 of some $7 million. And, of course, this negative swing occurred despite the increase in revenues from $169 million in 2021 to $177 million in 2023. Now, the articles on one obviously spoke about the overspend, the compensation or remuneration to the board members. In another media house, our least favorite one, Ellio, they obviously printed the rebuttal or the stern response from the HSA board. The board, which is chaired by Yvette Dilbert, has hit back. In a lengthy statement, the members addressed the criticisms in which they denied that the board meets unnecessarily and outlined the reasons why it has met more frequently and explained its heavy workload. The director said the HSA is the largest public institution in the Cayman Islands, managing a yearly budget of more than $100 million and audited revenues of over $200 million in 2024. The legal and good governance environment of the HSA demands experienced, engaged, and accountable board oversight of clinical, financial, strategic, and operational performance, the board stated in their lengthy statement responding to MPs. Board members are selected based on proven experience in relevant fields, including medicine, law, finance, and business. In its statement, the HSA board stressed very heavily the huge amount of diverse and complex work that it has undertaken over the last few years and the substantial time members have committed to these obligations, including a considerable amount of preparatory work for which they were not compensated. The meeting addresses care, quality issues, major capital and strategic projects, regulatory compliance, hospital projects, audit scrutiny, and financial performance, as well as policy reviews, the board said. The members also stressed that all meetings were well documented, reviewed, and audited, and they had not been questioned by auditors. So whilst the MPs have raised the alarm, quite notably for what can be described at face value as excessive spending, the board are pointing out that, the auditors didn't flag it, so why are MPs now complaining? They go on to point out the multiple meetings have been related to a slate of multifaceted issues, including oversight of adherence to updated international accreditation standards, evolving Cayman Islands and international regulatory requirements, an increase in service demand, adherence to financial requirements and organizational performance, large-scale capital investments, and capital measures related to quality, patient safety, and ethics. They point out that all of these board meetings have been transparent. The minutes have been very clear. And again, insisting that the compensation that some board members are receiving reflects documented time spent or an official HSA business, not to reward attendance arbitrarily or to increase overall remuneration. Now, some might say that was another example of glittering generalities. Other persons might say that if you are overseeing a budget of $100 million or up to $200 million, it is natural to accept that the board would be dealing with complex matters, and that would be par for the course. But certainly, it is difficult to justify $8,000 or $9,000 monthly payments for board members who, again, are publicly appointed and performing their civic or civil duties to the government. So I think it is, certainly arguable, but, when we look at it again, when you ask yourself, well, how do we make a swing from a robust $8 million to a loss of $7 million? Well, again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. When nobody's minding the barn, the fox will enter and the fox will have a heyday. Nobody's clearly watching the numbers. Nobody was watching the financial performance. We hear certainly what the board's position is. Of course, why would they? What would we expect them to say but to justify the earnings that they are pulling down? And we simply state or ask, do you, Joe Public, because this is your money, this is taxpayer money, do you consider that fair? Do you think it's reasonable? 745-2626 is the number. Ellio, have any thoughts?
Yeah, I have thoughts on both, from both angles of it, really. And you'll remember that a couple of weeks ago, we were chatting a little bit about, I think it was at the departure of Miss Susan Winspear.
Yes.
And
yes.
I mentioned at that point in time, if you will recall, that I did have an issue when it came to some of the payments on the particular board that I was sitting on, or still sit on. And it was a question, because to me, first of all, if you look at these, with the boards, there needs to be, and I believe the Minister of Finance has mentioned this, but there needs to be a clear look at it in terms of harmonizing things as much as possible, so you don't have this great disparity with one getting Cheerios and the other one's getting cornflakes or whatever. There needs to be some harmonization. And I think the Minister of Finance, if I'm correct, has mentioned that is one of the things he intends to do, have a revisit of that. But here was one of the problems that I had.
Cheerios and honey bunches of oats, I think, is the delta.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Yeah, you're the government. I'm here to help.
I'm with the government. I'm here to help, brother.
But, one of the concerns that came to me was, okay, you get a particular stipend on a board. And I asked the question, well, I'm inferring, I said, that you only get that stipend if you show up to the meetings. Right? And I was told, no. And I'm saying, so hold on a second. You're going to get the money whether you show up to the meeting or not. This doesn't seem right. And that was things like that is what I had a concern with. Now, when I raised that, for example, with the Auditor General, the previous Auditor General, Ms. Susan Winspear, again, it was one of those cases. Yes, it was, they're following as well the UK precedent. And I don't really care what precedent you're setting or who you're following. I think we need to look at it sensibly and say, is it something that's right or wrong? And of course, her position was, nothing wrong with the boards kind of lobbying the government and making some modifications or whatever. Now, I don't know if there was any report done, but to the best of my knowledge, there was not. And what really I would like to see and would have expected would that there be at least some mention of that. And in fairness to her now, she may very well have mentioned, I simply don't know about it. So I'll put that caveat on. But I would like to know that the Auditor General would mention those sort of things to say that, hey, here's some great disparities and or things such as remuneration, despite the fact that the members not showing up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that is one of the concerns that I have. But on the other hand, I would like to say that there are challenges, first of all, to find people who are willing to serve on boards. And you have that situation for many different reasons. There are persons, for example, that just simply don't want to be transparent in terms of where they eat, where they sleep, how much money they make, and everything else, just to be able to be on a board. There's challenges in terms of potential lawsuits, et cetera. There's a myriad of different complexities that get involved in terms of serving on some of those boards. When I read that particular article, I'm understanding that they're not getting a flat remuneration or a stipend. It's a matter that they're getting it based on how many meetings that they're actually having to convene. And I think Mr. Saunders in this particular case would be right. Well, let's make sure and have a visit at how many meetings you're having and actually see if all those meetings are in fact required.
Yes.
But I can also tell you that even when you're getting the stipend on the board, you're still doing a lot of work even outside of that, assuming you actually care about your job. You have to do a lot of work outside of that, reading reports and making a lot of decisions. It's simply not, for example, when we convene, we normally spend 5, maybe even as much as 6 hours in one meeting. But so it definitely has to be something that vary. And I will just throw another thing out. Bear in mind that if my memory serves me right, we also had on the HSA board at one point in time, there was some issues about corruption. There was persons who had entered in, as far as I can recall, private businesses and contracting with the HSA. And why do I say that? Now, that was in the past, hopefully long gone. But I remember mentioning these same things, Austin, when you and I were together many moons ago between 2006 and 2009. it is very quick and easy for us to jump based on the remuneration that we hear someone making and saying, that doesn't sound right. Sounds like it makes more than me. And that can conjure up a couple of things. But I'll tell you this. There are key positions in life that you want to make sure that those persons had a decent remuneration. I'm not saying exorbitant, but you don't want to be able to have persons tempted to corruption. I remember having this discussion, I think it was in relation to our customs officer at one point.
Right.
I would like to know that you're paying, for example, that customs officer who's going to be checking everybody's bag a decent enough pay so that when he looks in someone's bag or he or she looks in someone's bag and sees something, and rather than being offered, when they're offered $10,000 to let it slide, that their compensation is enough, that they can feel comfortable to say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to risk my career and blah, blah, blah for $10,000. So there needs to be a clear look in terms of, and I take the minister at his word, he'll go ahead and do it, but it needs to be a good look at all of the various boards to make sure that it's not being abused. Because if the fact, to Mr. Saunders' point, if the fact you're just calling meetings to call meetings and just keep racking up $8,000-9,000 bill for 1 month, then clearly it's not correct.
Yeah.
And then there needs to be a harmonization. There needs to be some sort of general rules that go straight across the board, even though depending on what board you're on, you might end up getting paid a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But the one I can definitely say I have an issue with is this one that I know is existing, at least in relation to one that I am aware of, where even if you don't show up as a director, you're going to get compensated. I don't believe that in that. I'm a person that if I'm not working, you're not paying. You're not playing, you're not paying. Right?
Indeed.
And so I just highlight that to show you some of what I consider to be clear abuses. But bear in mind that this is coming from top down, because whether it's chief officers or auditor generals, I didn't find anyone that seemed to have an issue with this.
Mm-hmm.
It took me as chairman of the board to say, but this can't be right.
Right.
What is the incentive for the individual to show up? This is like saying stay home and get paid, So I highlight that again, like I said, because it shows you that there's some clear problems that needs to be resolved. Nobody should be getting paid, as far as I'm concerned, if you're not working. Not just because you've been named a director should you get paid. It should be because you're actually working. So there's definitely things that needs to be fixed, but I just want to throw a little bit of balance in there to make sure that we don't get alarmed by numbers, because if you have a person that's really doing their job, it's like a politician. You've served. People might think that you got to understand, there's some jobs, it's not a 9-to-5 job.
No.
A police officer is not a 9-to-5 job.
That's right.
You don't run out of the middle of the road and say, someone's trying to rape me. And then the police officer goes, no, I'm sorry, I'm off duty. It doesn't work that way. There's some jobs that it technically doesn't end.
Indeed. But, when we look, and I hear all of the points that you raised, and I think they are all absolutely valid. And I think there's merit on both sides of this particular conversation. But I think even more importantly, and I don't want the point to be missed, is that whilst these boards are necessary, and they are, obviously, they consist of persons from the community, performing their civic duty, and we want to encourage more of that. I can also agree with you that there have been in the past complaints about the stipends that board members have received as compared to the workload that they're required to provide oversight for. The one that automatically springs to mind is the work permit board. Mm-hmm. Whilst perhaps they may not be managing hundreds of millions of dollars, they are processing a significant amount of work. When we look at even the immigration work permit statistics, over 40,000 work permits in 2024, that has to all go through the board. So obviously,
are you flagging right there for a second that just the size of your budget shouldn't determine how much?
Exactly.
No, I agree.
The size of your budget should not determine it, nor the complexities, as the board offer up as an excuse, is not, in my mind, an excuse, because there are other boards dealing with arguably as much complexity, if not more, process numbers, and are being paid a lot less than you're getting.
And again, that's where I go to the harmonization. One of the problems you had typically with the civil service, having served there as 13 years as a civil servant, is I get paid based on how much staff I have under me.
Yeah.
It's like, hold on a second. This does not make sense, guys.
None.
No, you're incentivizing me to populate myself, as many staff under me as possible, so I can get a bigger pay.
Right.
When in fact, you should probably be rewarding me for getting the same work done with less people.
Yes.
You know, so there's a lot of things. Like I said, that's where the harmonization, amongst other things, come in, is because I don't care about the size of the budget. Just that in itself does not necessarily dictate the complexities or how much time you have to spend. And to the very relevant point you're making,
yes,
the work permit might in fact be doing a hell of a lot more work.
Mm-hmm. But they're not being
and
paid
they don't have
near.
And they don't have $100 million budget.
They don't have $100 million budget,
but deserve to be paid more.
Absolutely. The other issue that concerns me is, and this is something that we should be, I think, cognizant of, if not demanding, across all of the boards, and that is, it's not a question of how many meetings you have per month, but how efficient those meetings are. What are you doing with the time?
What have we accomplished?
What are we accomplishing? We've heard the term value for money repeatedly, to the point where as we can, memorize the term in definition by, subsequent and various auditor generals. But when we look at, the excuse or the reasoning that the HSA boards are giving in their defense because of the complexities of the matters that they're dealing with, well, again, you got a $200 million budget. It goes without saying these matters are complex. But how efficient? What are you doing in terms of your time management? How long are you spending on single individual issues? Unfortunately, the article, and I don't believe they said it in Finance Committee, stipulated how many meetings they were having per month that were obviously questionable in terms of the number of meetings. But I've heard anywhere from 5 to 8 meetings in a single calendar month, which is ridiculous. It is not an efficient use of time, and certainly one of the reasons that one could blame to the overspend. But the final point I want to make, and you made this point many times, and I'm glad you do, and you talk about MPs who show up and do the job, but then come election day, lose their seat, whereas other MPs get by on a wing and a prayer, barely doing anything at all, and they get reelected for entire careers. This issue on the HSA, whether we talk about the swing in financial fortunes from a surplus to a deficit, or as it relates to the amount of time spent and the amount of taxpayer dollars paid to boards to operate or provide oversight, is another example of what happens when you have a minister who takes a hands-off approach. Voters will criticize elected persons, say, well, I didn't see you enough. Where you been? Mm-hmm. They expect you to be knocking on their doors. They expect you to be visible in the communities. But a minister's job in particular is extremely difficult, and likewise, so too are the backbenchers. Because on the one hand, you're writing policy. But on the next hand, you're not allowed to dictate how that policy is implemented, but you have a responsibility yourself to provide oversight. So you're following these board meetings. You're reading the board minutes themselves, because one thing is for certain, and this case fundamentally once again shines a light on it. Whilst there are questions undoubtedly about the efficiency of the HSA board, there are questions about where were internal audit controls, where was maybe even the deputy governor in all of this. The person, whether deserving or otherwise, i.e. the MP, is the only one held accountable. And I'm not suggesting that the former Minister of Health didn't have a clear role or lack thereof in this debacle, but as it is oftentimes, it's not always the MPs or the political arm that is at fault.
No,
but they're the only ones held accountable.
You're absolutely correct on many different points. And if
45 seconds.
I'm not going to get much done in 45 seconds, but you're absolutely correct on many points, and I will cover them when we come back, particularly when you talk about accountability. I want to touch on that when we come back from the break.
Thank you very much. The phone lines remain open, 745-2626. And, of course, we're talking about the massive overspend on the HSA side, the Health Services Authority. If you've got an opinion or a thought or a question on this issue, give us a call. 745-2626 is the number. But we do have to pause and take a very short commercial break. But the conversation will continue when Straight Talk returns right here on Bobo 103.1 FM on your radio dial. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
More Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio coming up. Be a part of the conversation by calling 745-2626. Bobo 103.1.
It's back! The Rubus Fuel for Life campaign is turning up the heat this summer, and you could win a share of over $90,000 in free fuel or even $20,000 in cold hard cash. A car wash on Rubus, restaurant gift cards, Coca-Cola swag bags. Fuel up at any Rubus station in Grand Cayman or Cayman Brac now through August 29th for your chance to win. Rubus Pure Summer Fuel for Life. Brought to you by Monster, Lucky Rabbit, Uncle Luke, Good Guys Wash Shack, Cyclone, and Coca-Cola.
Health Services Authority is now offering online payment options for patients. Patients of HSA can now pay their bills, including deposits, towards scheduled services online at payments.hsa.ky. The secure, new online payment system accepts debit or credit cards and is in addition to the available payment options of cash, check, and online bank transfer. For quick, easy, and secure payment directly from your phone or computer, visit HSA's new online payment system at payments.hsa.ky.
Be prepared. Construction costs have gone up, so you may be underinsured. Call your insurance company for a checkup to make sure you have enough coverage for your home and belongings. Be informed. Make a plan. Be prepared. For more information, visit caymanprepared.ky.
When it comes to weekly meal prep, I trust Kirk Market to provide the best value for quality proteins. The butchers at Kirk Market are super helpful. They always slice my steaks perfectly. Kirk Market has everything I need for healthy and flavorful protein-packed meals. From lean cuts of CAB choice beef, tender CAB prime beef, the juiciest pork, and all-natural hormone-free poultry, to their seafood section with everything from fresh local snapper to omega-3 rich salmon. I choose Kirk Market for the highest quality proteins to support my healthy lifestyle. Kirk Market. Eat well, live well, and discover a world of choice.
Insurance matters. It gives you the confidence to live life as you should, knowing you're protected. As a leading local insurer for over 25 years, Island Heritage has a consistent track record of providing best-in-class customer service with quick and efficient claims processing. This means insurance you can rely on when you need it most. The Island Heritage Way. Visit us online at islandheritageinsurance.com today to learn more about our home, contents, motor, marine, and commercial insurance products. Go on and live your life. With Island Heritage, you can.
With you in mind, we have your style. Find what you need down every aisle. You want saving, selection, and quality. That's why we're your home store. Home store. The way to make a home. The way to make a home.
Across Cayman on FM, online, and on your smart speaker. This is Bobo 103.1, powered by Health Services Authority, committed to caring for you. The views and opinions expressed on Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio do not necessarily reflect or represent the views of Stingray Media, its staff, or contributors. Callers to the program accept full responsibility for the views expressed. The show host and affiliates are not liable for any statements made or any harm claimed. All callers to the program indemnify Straight Talk from all claims. Offensive, defamatory, or unlawful content will not be tolerated. Be a part of the conversation by calling 745-2626. Now, here's Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio on Bobo 103.1.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Straight Talk with your host, Austin Harris, and myself, Ellio Solomon. The number to call here up in the studio is 745-2626. Again, that's 745-2626 or 928-2562 if you'd like to get us in here on WhatsApp. We are discussing this whole issue about HSA and what is at least being argued as a perceived excessive amount of money being spent by the board of directors for HSA. I just wanted to touch a little bit on this issue about accountability. You made some excellent points. You talked about the politicians. You talked about the board of directors, the civil service in terms of accountability. And I think it is so important. I talked earlier on as we started this program, and I'm just going to continue to be honest, the liberation of not running for office. Okay?
It feels good.
Let's be clear. I want to, let me touch first of all on the politicians and we as the general public Again, I want to remind persons, and I'm going to say the royal we, I'm 100% sure it's not everyone. But as my colleague was talking about, we need to think different, act different, and vote differently. And he quite rightly raised again the issue about, persons saying, well, we didn't see you. And I'll never forget, there was a debate. This is a public debate. I think it was held at the Harcourt Theater. And someone was talking about seeing their politician. And I remember from then arguing in this debate, what is this desire that you have to be seeing the person? I don't get it. I'm sure at some point in time you might need the person's ear. But there's this overwhelming desire, like, you didn't show up at the bar, you weren't drinking with me. It's like, listen, if the guy is doing that, let's be clear, he's not working.
Yep.
He is not working.
Yep. Not for you, not for anybody.
It's no different if you have a company, you sell shoes. I don't care if you sell shoes. I don't care if you do banking. I don't care what business you're doing. If the guy is at the bar drinking, he's not working. Okay? Maybe, depending on what it is, maybe a sales job. But let's just be clear. If he's out there at the bar, that is precisely what he's doing, selling himself for the next election, that you're just going to vote for him because you saw him, but it wasn't because he was doing the people's work.
Right.
But to your point also about wanting to hold the politicians accountable, but what about the civil service? Let's be clear. This is where I talked about the fees. You would expect that a chief officer, which, by the way, they make pretty good money.
Yes.
In fact, when I was there, some of them making more than the politicians.
Yes.
But you only want to beat up on the politician.
Yes.
You're not concerned. You're not going to be the one to get up and say as a chief officer, and the list goes on. Hold on, I don't know if this is right. This is the public funds. We're spending this, and at the end of the day, they're not even showing up. I would expect, fundamentally, this is something your chief officers, deputy chief officers, your civil servants should be doing. They are the ones that are 100% guaranteed continuity. But let's understand that some civil servants have the attitude, and I can tell you, I worked there for 13 years. Some of them have the attitude that we hear what the politicians saying, but we can just walk them out. They're only here for 4 years. They just drag you along. Nothing gets implemented, and they have the same thing happening even between the ministry staff, and I hope some of these new ministers are listening. That's what I want them to do. Play this for the new ministers. Because if they think I'm wrong, what is it? Fafo. Okay?
Yeah.
Here's what's happening. You're going to be telling your chief officer, I need this done. And they're dragging it out. Because they don't want to do it. We don't have to get into why they don't want to do it. They just don't want to do it. And they can just drag you out. Yep. I can give you a good example. You had the Minister of Tourism, who was that at the time? Mr. Moscow Colonel. He gives an order, a directive. Let's move forward with the conservation plan for the Turtle Center. When that was? What was in 2019 or something?
A little while ago.
A good while ago.
A good while ago.
Not happened yet, Bobo.
Still waiting on it.
Still waiting.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the kind of nonsense that you have. And then you have this promiscuous relationship between ministry staff, as in the civil service, and the people now down into the specific department. And again, they're trying to override both the board and the ministry. And so we need to see all of this. And I say that because we as the general public needs to keep an open mind when we hear a lot of this nonsense. Okay? It's one thing that you can sit and say, oh my God, that minister there and all of this going on. So hold on a second. We're not paying civil servants too?
Yes.
They're not there 24 hours a day. They wasn't there for the last 7, 10, 12 years?
Yes. Yes.
So where's the accountability there?
Quite right.
Okay, so all I'm going to say here on this HSA thing is the honest answer is, I believe, as a reasonable thinking person, is to say I don't know what is happening in HSA. It is impossible for you and I to know. But here's what we're going to say. We can say the frequency of these meetings seems a little bit excessive. Can I get a little bit more information on what these meetings are about? Because they seem excessive. But because they seem excessive doesn't mean that it is excessive. Maybe they're dealing with a situation that simply requires it. But we can flag that as a red flag. We can flag it and say these amounts of money seems high. But we're going to keep an open mind about it until we can get all the facts and the figures. That is the reasonable thing to do. But bottom line is, I want the public to understand we pay the civil servants significantly large amounts of money, especially people in these ministries. Many of them are making more money than the persons you have elected. And I'm telling you, they deliberately will drag and ignore things that the minister is saying. And this is why I'm saying it to the new ministers, please take my word for it. I don't care. I am liberated. I am free. There are going to be persons in your ministry that you think they're smiling and like they're like roaches, biting and blowing same time. They're smiling with you, but they're cutting your throat at the same time because they're not working on what you want to be have work done.
Yes.
And they're going to run you around, especially you new, or they're going to want to run you around all over the place. But all I'm going to say is what I have seen in the civil service, both as a civil servant for 13 years and having been elected, is, let's be clear, there is some things that needs to be done in terms of accountability, but not just for elected members. They have to be held accountable too, of course. But don't forget your civil service. There is some serious corruption and everything you can imagine going on up inside of there.
Yeah.
Okay? Just plain, straight, simple.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's getting completely ridiculous. I have said to the minister, well, I look forward to getting the briefing, you see, because again, where the briefing coming from? Is the briefing coming to sit and say, does the minister say, I want to hear from everybody? No. A chief officer and just, and he telling you if it red, if it blue, if Austin's a good guy, if Ellio's a bad guy. No. So my last comment, again, to the ministers, particularly the new ones. Don't think that you walking in there and everyone them blowing up inside your ear is your friend. You're here to do a job on behalf of the public. You tell them what you want done, and you got to make sure and get on top of them to make sure it happens. They say work in the civil service like pushing a chain up a hill.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do that. And the other thing they got with civil servants like nails without heads. You can drive them in, but you can't. Almost impossible to get them back out. You need to stay on top of them because you can see what's going to happen, just like you're seeing it right now. It can be you getting the blame, even though you just arrived. You just come here.
Indeed.
You just arrive here. But the chief officer, he quiet. He not going to jump out in the paper now and say, well, really don't blame this new minister. We are the ones who've been here for the last 14 years. He not going to say that. No, he going to make you take the blame. Remember that.
Yes, indeed. We got a contributor to the program, gentlemen. I'm listening intently to the conversation. And yes, you're correct. The level of expenditure, the level of lack of efficiency, the level of the number of meetings, all raise a number of significant questions. But let us remember, who appoints these board members, if not the politician themselves? This is another example of cronyism. Politicians either nominating their donors, their supporters who helped them during the election, and they put them in lofty positions, and they pay them exceedingly well. I will say, though, I think perhaps it's unfair to blame the deputy governor because, again, he doesn't appoint those board members. Well, I will just certainly say to that writer on the last bit that, okay, and with the greatest of respect to the deputy governor himself, and this is why we asked the question, it doesn't diminish his responsibility. It doesn't diminish the responsibility of the internal audit controls. Don't wait till he gets to the Auditor General's office. That's when it becomes a big deal. Each department have their own internal controls, and one would expect a department as big as the HSA have some significant oversight, you would think. But also included in those boards, in addition to the political appointees, are the ex officio officers. These are civil servants, whether they be chief officers,
and they attend the board
officers, head of departments, and those persons are put there under the rule of law, but their oversight is not done by the politicians. It is done by the deputy governor as the head. So that's why we say when we talk about accountability, it is fine and dandy to, again, hold your ministers or your politicians accountable for failures on their watch. But what happens to the other elements in this equation that continues and arguably may be just as culpable for the situation we find ourselves in? And again, I just say, I'm not going to suggest whether the previous minister, had any reason to be held accountable, but I will simply say that is why the job of ministers in particular, and arguably now under the new rule, parliamentary secretaries, before that they were councillors, the level of oversight that MPs, they're elected to write policy, they're elected to ensure that policy is in fact followed, but they have the obligation that they can't, tread on the operational ground. So they make the rules. They say this is what we want, anyone in particular. But let's face it, if the chief officer don't agree with a policy, direction, they will do everything in their power to make sure that it doesn't happen.
Well, I can show you evidence of that. Let me just say as well, if we look at the process for those who are interested, yes, the politicians will go ahead and say, I'm appointing Austin Harris, Ellio, another individual on a particular board. But again, those boards have governance, and they're governed by the public authorities act or law. So when you have ex officio members who are the civil servants, they may not be necessarily voting on that particular board, but they are there for a reason. They're there to offer advice, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
You think that they're unable to say, hold on a minute, guys, we just held meeting here, and all we did was eat lunch.
Yeah.
But everyone here will get $750. Yeah. Is that what? That's somehow out of their remit? They can't mention that? They can't deal with that issue?
Right.
So, and again, in defense of Mr. Mann, saying, yes, he's the head, he's the deputy governor, he's head of the entire civil service, but things, he can't possibly know everything, right, Austin? Someone has to flag it to him.
Yeah.
Someone has to call it to his attention. So there is all this chain of command, but I want to encourage the public to understand, yes, everyone has to be accountable, and that is the operative word. Everyone has to be accountable.
Indeed. Another writer says, without a doubt, the buck stops with the ministers. Well, again, that would be right in half of the time. Certainly that discounts the point that my colleague made, that there are ex officio members. They're permanent members of these boards. And that's important, too, because unlike the appointed members who will change based on one administration to the next, the ex officio have been there throughout the years. So they know the problems. They know the history behind some of these issues. They're there to guide the new incoming board, and they're also there to provide the valuable checks and balances. That is a point that we throw around often, but checks and balances are important only when they work and when they're utilized.
This is an opportunity for a little education, enlightening, and elevation. Okay? You're saying that the minister is ultimately responsible. So if the minister is ultimately responsible and he has a chief officer that he told last year to do something, does the minister have the right to say you're fired? No, he doesn't. In fact, when you had ministers in the past, like Mr. Bush, that was, oh, no, he not working for me. We said he was a dictator. Mm-hmm. We said he's a bad guy. He won't kick care about out. No. There is no minister that can hire and fire. He might have a little influence somewhere. Maybe he might get a little whisper of some little thing extra going on. But according to the rules, let's be clear, the minister cannot fire that staff up inside of there. He cannot fire any civil servant, and he cannot hire any civil servant. So let me ask you, how he hold them accountable? No, there is an accountability process. There is laws there, and at the same time, those ex officio members, all of those civil servants have an obligation, if they're seeing something going awry, blah, 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 to carry it on to the deputy governor, who would then look and say, this is not proper, and put in place the proper process. And if someone needs to be evaluated and terminated, and the list goes on, he would do it. The ministers are there in terms of your political representative, and clearly has the right to do certain things. But I am telling you, that civil servants, many times it has happened. I have examples if you'd like. They're going to get the instruction, they get the directive, but 10 years later, still not happen.
Indeed.
Still not happen.
Writer to the program says, Ellio has hit the nail on the head. The deputy governor is directly responsible for the civil service. I have been in the senior management ministry meetings, and I have seen and heard firsthand the chief officer give the ministers the confirmation that their projects will get done. But as soon as the minister leaves the room, the conversation resorts to reasons why the project will not be delivered or completed. CEOs on a regular basis across the government spectrum regularly halt projects, slow track projects to make the elected arm look bad on spite. You think civil servants aren't political? You dreaming in Technicolor. So there you go.
There you go. Somebody got it.
I know the writer who's sending the message. Of course, will remain anonymous, but
they should know. Is what
they
you're
should
pointing.
know. That's all I can tell you is they should know.
They're in the know.
They're in absolutely 110%.
And I don't know who it is, but I appreciate their commentary because trust me, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to open your eyes to it.
Yeah.
Don't you think all of them up inside there, as our long lost friend now would say, is lily white? No. There is some serious stuff going on up inside there. You know, and this is where you understand that when ministers get up tomorrow and say, you know, we want full ministerial power to be able to hire and fire civil servants, we'd be the first one to say, oh, this is corruption, this is going too far.
Mm-hmm.
And it will always remain that way until, you know, jolly old England decides that he wants to hand it over. You know, anything the politician wants to do, that's corruption. But you cannot hold, if I'm working right now on Straight Talk for Austin Harris, or vice versa, and he's telling me to do something and I'm not doing it, but he can't fire me. Also, he can't change my pay. He can't say, you know, I get no vacation. So hold on a second. How can you hold me accountable? I just got to look at you and laugh. You're like a dog with no teeth.
Mm.
So you can't put ministers up in the civil service as dogs with no teeth and then say this is a bad dog, you know, holding things accountable. No. Understand that there is, at least in this particular case, a shadow side to this particular system. The minister's there, and he has certain powers, particularly those in the parliament. But when it comes to that civil service, it is the governor and the deputy governor that has the power there. And our civil servants, so that we don't blame the deputy governor, Mr. Franz Manderson. Mr. Manderson is not omniscient. He's not omnipotent. The only how he can be able to know something, and that's either he makes a discovery himself or certain things are brought to his attention.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't do that, he don't know either.
Yeah.
So when these members are doing things and going awry, somebody has to flag it and say, sir, Mr. Manderson, there's a problem here. I just want to let you know.
Sure.
We had 5 meetings down here at the HSA, and these guys just sitting down eating lunch. This is $750 a pop.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, if you put that in writing to him and he don't do nothing, well, that's a totally different matter. Now we can point at the deputy governor.
Right.
But until that happens, he's not going to be sitting at night, Austin, you know, I had a dream. Yeah, man. I had one dream, you know.
It was so real to me.
It was so realistic. I kind of listen to why I inferred that there was some members down there in HSA that was just having meetings and eating food.
That's right.
I'll be checking on this first thing tomorrow morning because I don't have anything else to do.
That's right.
It don't work that way.
Another writer to the program says, in fairness, the same is likewise true in the reverse. Rest assured, ministers themselves can and do make some civil servant lives very difficult as well. And that also comes from somebody who should know what they're talking about. And you can just take it from me to be a fact. And I think that's also right as well. You know, we've seen it again, you know, whether it be the absentee ministers or perhaps the authoritarian ministers, just personality types don't always work well, you know. So yes, it is true on both sides of the coin. But again, it highlights the need that unless we are all rowing together in the same direction, then there are going to be problems. The public service in particular, costs associated with the public service are different in the private sector, largely because of the checks and balances that are intended to be a part of the system. But that system only works well when everybody does their job as it was intended, or certainly as the law requires.
I'll say 2 things.
Yes.
Let's not confuse making someone's life miserable as having anything real thing to do with accountability. I can sit here and make your life miserable. You can make my life miserable. And not really addressing the issue about accountability. Accountability is when you, at the end of the day, know what has to be done, instructs it to be done. I'm not doing it, and you're not holding me accountable. You're not saying, no, I told you to do something, and here's how I'm going to hold you accountable. That's accountability.
Yeah.
But we can make each other miserable for a myriad of different reasons. And let's just be clear, when it comes to the civil service, the civil servants are supposed to be neutral. The last administration could have been saying we're heading east. The only job of the civil servant is to offer advice. Well, if you want to go east, maybe we should do it this way because the wind's coming from the east, so we could use a little tact. We can go a little bit north, then northwest, and work our way slowly east.
Mm-hmm.
He can offer that advice. He can offer suggestions on how fast we go, how slow we go. But ultimately, let's be clear, the political directorate is trying to carry this country east, and you must do your job to carry us east. At any point in time that I can find that you are doing something to thwart, impede, frustrate the process of moving east, you are not a good civil servant. You are not neutral, and you should be terminated. And if the next administration comes in after your 8 years of hard work with one administration and he wants to now go west, it's not your question to say, guys, we're wasting time. We were just heading east. You start heading west. That is the neutrality of the civil service. And when you don't do that, you're failing to do your duties, whether you like it or not. And to me, the accountability process is terminate him. Because he's not doing his job. He refuses to do his job. Terminate him. And when that's not happening, you're not holding him accountable. And therefore, if you're not holding him accountable, you can't now turn to the politician and say, why didn't we go west?
Quite right. Indeed. Well, 745-2626 is the number. All we can do is certainly read the headlines, share with you the important news stories that impact your life, and certainly, as we have demonstrated today, using our former experience, having been in the job and having been in circumstances where these events do occur, good or bad, try to break down the conversation and sometimes even the hidden meaning.
Which carries it a little bit further than all the rest of the media houses.
Without a doubt, and then that is a fact, because many will, quote unquote, criticize and say the grass is greener on the other side, but have never actually traveled to the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And others will also say, boy, you guys are taking it so easy on the government these days. What a difference from crosstalk. And I say, I tell them the same thing all the time. Crosstalk, we thought we knew the better way to do it. We thought certainly we knew the complications that existed, but until you've been to the river and had to swim in the river, you will not know whether it's cold or deep. And we can tell you that we've been to the river, we know how deep it is, we know how cold it is, and therefore when it is necessary and fair and legitimate to do so, we will hold our government officials to account. But at the same token, it is important to not, I guess, have a gotcha moment as your entire principle, as some people may choose to do, because that's not helpful.
I'll add something to what you're saying. There's a reason why we say that the government is still in the honeymoon stage. The government's just got in. What in the world are you going to be beating the government up about?
Correct.
Not too quiet. You have to give anyone a reasonable amount of time. And first of all, we shouldn't be just looking to beat any government up anyway.
Right.
But you have to give persons enough period of time to start to expose what their ideas are and to start to take actions. And then we can start to hold people accountable. You said you were going to do this, but you didn't do it, and the list goes on. This is why it's a honeymoon stage.
Quite right.
So let them enjoy their honeymoon.
But I will say this to the government and to the opposition as well. We are here to help you do your job. And having been where you are, we certainly can understand the challenges and opportunities that you face. So by all means, we have extended an olive branch, an invitation to both the government and the opposition. Neither have really chomped back or embraced it, but we still remain hopeful so that we can have you sit at the table, have you discussing the issues that matter
to
the very same people who voted for you not too long ago and put you in office, to maintain those open lines of communications. 59 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock is the time. We have to pause once again. Check in with your top of the hour news brought to you by news partner BBC. But there's still much more Straight Talk to come next on Bobo 103.1 FM.
Bobo.
BBC News.
BBC News.
World news from the BBC. Violent clashes. Thick black smoke.
A tremendous legal victory.
Crucial elections.
Destructive wind.
A search and recovery operation.
A race against time.
An imminent threat. Flying a drone over a rival team's training session.
Whatever is happening, wherever it's happening, catch up with the latest news bulletins from the BBC.
The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo FM.
The BBC's From Our Own Correspondent.
In today's Russia, no one is allowed anywhere near the political stage if they pose a serious challenge to Vladimir Putin.
Stories and reflections from our reporters around the world.
There is a major sense of insecurity here.
More people are coming in from Sudan every day.
From Our Own Correspondent from the BBC.
The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo FM.
How can we understand the world better?
The BBC World Service is a window onto the wider world.
A vantage point from which to survey a new horizon.
News, reports, and analysis from around the world.
Stories we think matter.
Different people from different societies.
We get to the heart of global issues.
News, stories, and global perspectives from the BBC World Service.
The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo FM. This is Bobo 103.1, powered by Health Services Authority.
At Health Services Authority, they are committed to caring for you. They are Cayman's largest and longest standing healthcare provider, offering the most comprehensive range of inpatient, outpatient, and public health services at 9 different locations across all 3 islands.
Across Cayman on 103.1 FM, online, and on your smart speaker. The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo 103.1.
Hello, I'm Tom Dewsbury with the BBC World News. Air India's confirmed that all but one of the 242 people on board its flight that crashed in Ahmedabad were killed. The sole survivors being treated in hospital. The Boeing Dreamliner 787 was bound for London when it crashed into a medical college hostel less than a minute after takeoff. It's feared there are also many casualties on the ground. Yogita Limoye is in Ahmedabad.
Several hours since that crash took place, you can see there's a tree that has been upturned and is still smoking here, and behind me literally everything is charred. It's actually quite hard to even talk because the air is still smelling very acrid. It's still full of smoke. Where the plane crashed, there's a row of buildings. I've counted 5 or 6 of them that have been completely charred. So the scale of devastation on the ground as well, the residential area where the crash occurred is just massive.
The chief executive of Air India says it'll take time for investigators to find out the cause of the crash in Ahmedabad. US air safety experts are being sent, along with officials from the plane maker Boeing and the engine manufacturer GE Aerospace. Donald Trump's insisted the US is still committed to reaching a nuclear deal with Iran, hours after warning Israel not to strike Iranian facilities. There's been heightened speculation that Israel's preparing to launch an attack. Mr. Trump earlier said such a move would jeopardize an agreement on Tehran's nuclear program. Our security correspondent Frank Gardner has this on Iran's nuclear activities.
What they're saying is that they are going to build a new facility and that they are going to upgrade their centrifuges and replace them with what they call 6th-generation centrifuges. In other words, that they could spin a huge amount faster and produce more material. Now, the IAEA, that's the UN nuclear watchdog, have said that Iran has enough material that it could produce 9 nuclear bombs. Now, that's not quite the same as saying that they will be able to deploy those, but Israel, certainly in the form of Benjamin Netanyahu, considers that this poses an existential threat.
A Democratic Party senator has been wrestled to the ground and handcuffed after trying to ask the US Homeland Security Secretary a question at a news conference about the riots in Los Angeles. Alex Padilla was forcibly removed from a briefing in the city where Kristi Noem was discussing the official response to several nights of unrest. Peter Bowes has more.
According to Kristi Noem, he was treated in this way because he hadn't initially identified himself, that was inappropriate. She said, I will say that people need to identify themselves before they start lunging at people. It wasn't becoming of a US senator. And she added that the handcuffs were released when the agents were made aware of who he was. Now, I think the issue is, did the agents, in that split second when they heard him raise his voice, did they know who he was?
World News from the BBC. The United Nations General Assembly has voted overwhelmingly in favour of a draft resolution demanding an immediate, unconditional and permanent ceasefire in Gaza. The document also called for the resumption of UN-delivered aid and the release of all hostages still held by Hamas. The UN says a telecommunications blackout in Gaza is paralysing aid operations. Deputy UN spokesperson Farhan Haq said the total collapse of internet and data services had cut lifelines to emergency services, humanitarian coordination and critical information for civilians. The authorities in Ghana have demanded the closure of more than 60 radio stations, accusing them of breaking various regulations. Prominent opposition-aligned FM stations are among those affected. The National Communications Authority said some of them did not have valid authorisation or had failed to renew their licences. From Accra, Thomas Nadi reports.
Many worry the directive could stifle media freedom. The founder of one of the stations linked to the opposition, Asase FM, explained that their license was renewed only a couple of months late in December last year. The radio stations have been given a 30-day grace period to rectify the alleged infractions. The planned closures highlight Ghana's continuing struggle with politicized media regulation, often perceived as partisan tit-for-tat between the two dominant political parties.
Northern Ireland's police chiefs blamed what he called bigots and racists for 3 nights of rioting in the town of Ballymena. The disturbances began on Monday after 2 Romanian teenagers appeared in court charged with sexually assaulting a teenage girl. And posters have begun appearing across Venice denouncing the forthcoming wedding there of the Amazon boss Jeff Bezos. The millionaire's planning a 3-day extravaganza in the city to celebrate his marriage to Lauren Sanchez. That's your latest world news from the BBC.
The views and opinions expressed on Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio do not necessarily reflect or represent the views of Stingray Media, its staff, or contributors. Callers to the program accept full responsibility for the views expressed. The show host and affiliates are not liable for any statements made or any harm claimed. All callers to the program indemnify Straight Talk from all claims. Offensive, defamatory, or unlawful content will not be tolerated. Be a part of the conversation by calling 745-2626. Now, here's Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio on Bobo 103.1.
And welcome back, to more Straight Talk here on Bobo 103.1 FM and simulcast live over YouTube and Facebook as the conversation continues. 7 minutes past the hour of 6 o'clock as we move into our final segment here on the program, but the phone lines remain open at 745-2626, or you can reach out to us on our WhatsApp line, 928-2562. Whether you want to obviously offer up your comments or questions as they relate to the primary conversation we've been having for the better part of an hour, looking at the HSA spending situation, the state of affairs with their, obviously, financial performance, which undoubtedly really links directly to the kind of money that we're paying our boards, their boards, questions of efficiency, questions of do we need so many meetings, questions of where is the oversight, and ultimately, who should be held accountable. 745-2626 is the number. We do have some feedback coming from the WhatsApp lines. Let's go to those calls now.
Gentlemen, this conversation goes back to a conversation we were having a couple of months ago on your show, just before election. Do we really need politicians to run a country, or can the country be run just by civil servants alone? Because it seems now like the politicians are powerless. So it's on certain things it's the civil servants that is running the country. So we don't need no politicians. So why do we have an election to? So it's a government with 3 faces. Then the judicial system, the civil servants, and the political system, and the political system has the less power. The politician has the less power, and we spend a lot of money. We spend a lot of money on them. The country has spent a lot of money on politicians, and they're powerless. So it doesn't make any sense to have these politicians then. We could just run the country.
All right. Well, thank you very much to that listener for sharing their views. We have another listener with some further comments. Let's go to that now.
Good evening, Austin and Ellio. A quick thought here. For me, everybody is entitled to their opinion about this new government and how well it's doing or how it is promising to do things. But for me, to be frank with you, I've already made the call. This government does not want really to solve the problems upon which it campaigned on, particularly in relation to immigration and job preferences. Now, if I can use two sports metaphors, you've got your Hail Mary pass, the one that you throw when you've got no time on the clock remaining or very little time. You throw it into the end zone, and sometimes you are lucky somebody catches it, you score a touchdown. Or what they call in England a hit and hope. You just send the ball into the penalty box, and you hope that somebody, will pick it up and something will happen. Now, usually, of course, these are called gambles, but to me, what this government has done is worse than that, because they're clearly going to fail unless they change direction. Now, they have rejected 3 key proposals. They have clearly rejected the idea of ensuring that the status grants do not exceed the net growth in the population. A lot of people think that it should be at 50%. So if you grant in the preceding year, like you have a birth rate of 800 in the preceding year, in the following year you shouldn't grant more than 400 status. They have rejected that. They have rejected the idea of amending the public service management law to ensure that Caymanians are given preference. There's no point telling people if your qualifications are close to what the foreigner has, then we'll give preference to you. No. If you qualify, you should be given the job. They have also, thirdly, rejected the idea that a rollover must start now. Because I was watching the Premier together with Minister Anglin, Ralston Anglin, on the buzz sometime last week. They never even touched that. And they never even touched the idea that rollover has to start now. Otherwise, it means that the effect of this policy will be in 9 years' time. To me, if I can sum up my call, there are 2 things that in future will be remembered as having messed up the immigration system and the job preferences system. Some people will start with the mass grants, which were not given by Makiva Bush, by the way, they were given by the whole cabinet. That will be the first problem. The second problem will be that Andre Ebanks has come into government with big promises. He too has not delivered. And these are the 2 things that people are going to remember 10, 15 years down the road when finally Caymanians will lose total control over their country. I thank you. Have a nice day. By the way, the reason I say that these have been rejected is because the government is aware of these. They've been suggested to them. They've been communicated to members of cabinet. They've been on the talk shows, and they've been talked about for quite some years, at least for 2 of them. And then the other one about when rollover begins has been talked about for weeks now. And the mere fact that they haven't addressed these is a sign that internally they have discussed them and they have rejected them. I just thought I should clarify that. Have a nice day.
Well, certainly we're grateful to the listener for his comments and certainly his opinions on it. I'm not perhaps inclined to take that view. I think on the one hand, what we've seen from the government so far is them come out strongly addressing some of the issues that largely have languished on shelves or have been problematic for years, and they've taken some rather bold steps, which we believe is commendable. But I also believe this is a game of politics. It is not unheard of for the government to hold some things close to their chest, even though they are at, radio interviews and the like. I would be more inclined to perhaps judge the government after I have seen read their strategic policy statement. They still have yet that time in which they're going to outline what their priorities are. And if at that time, when they do so, and perhaps to the caller's point, some of these otherwise obvious issues are somewhat left out, then perhaps we can have a little bit more room to judge. But I don't think it's surprising at all that the politicians within this honeymoon period, the first 100 days, have been making some waves, but in large cases holding something back, which will be contained in the strategic policy statement, is what my hope is. But really, at this point in time, neither the caller nor I could say we're right, because we just don't know what is on the government's radar or what is part of their plan, and we have to wait like everyone else. Ellio?
Well, an adage is what we call the old sayings, and there's a reason why we have adages. It's because it's kind of been proven and tested, and one that comes immediately to mind is anything can happen between the cup and the lip. It's too early. It's too early for me to make any strict judgment on the government. Not that I'm inclined to disagree completely with where the author is going, but I think it's too early.
Yeah.
You can look at something and say, based on the present trajectory, I think that guy is going to miss.
Right.
Until you discover that he knows that there's a wind that's going to blow slightly to the west at approximately 10 miles per hour. It's just too early.
Yeah,
100%. To the other author who talks about the fact, well, do you need politicians? I mean, the civil service could run it. He has a lot of merit in what he's saying. You could technically get rid of the politicians. But let me just say that you would be remiss in doing so. You would be wrong if you did that. And this is where I have mentioned before in this program to the persons who vote. We need to really take it as something very, very serious, because understand that the only group that you can hold accountable are the elected officials.
That is correct.
You can hold them accountable because you can choose who to hire and you can choose who to fire. You cannot fire a civil servant. That's for the governor to decide. So they work for the governor. They don't work for you. Mm-hmm. They are not working for the people of this country. If they work for the people of the country, it is because they are following the instructions of those persons you can hold accountable. Right. So the way to look at it, if you see that the politician seems to be powerless, is perhaps to consider reasonably, but of course this is something that concerns Caymanians, because the UK hasn't given us the right to think that way yet. But maybe you need to consider whether your politician should in fact get a little bit more power, that they can hold at the minimum their ministry staff accountable. Maybe that's what needs to be done, and not make it that every time a minister moves or decides that he doesn't want a particular chief officer in his ministry, he's not accused of something corrupt, etc. But bear in mind, those are the ones we hold accountable. You cannot hold, none of us can hold the civil service accountable. It's for the governor, for the deputy governor to decide. You and I can walk out tomorrow and see a police officer doing something with our own eyes. We can see that. It doesn't matter. You can now go through a process. There's things such as the ombudsman office where we can lodge complaints and try to be able to hold them accountable in those sort of fashions. But in terms of the raw accountability to say this person's going to be terminated, I don't like what they do, I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, I've been in that situation even just quite recently. Doesn't work.
Yes.
And then they run an investigation. They come back and tell you something totally different. And even though they should have investigated and inquired with 6 people, but we only interviewed 2. Mm-hmm. It's all nonsense. Really, what you need to do is strengthen yourselves as the public, and you strengthen yourselves as the public by strengthening the instrument that you control, and that is your elected officials, the one that you vote for, the one that you can say, and you should be able to say to someone. I mean, if I am to send my messenger, should I not be able to send my messenger to say, let's be clear, I am sending my messenger to you. Take my word, do what he says, or otherwise something is going to happen. So the messenger is the one that I control, and I can't make somebody abuse him. I can't make somebody diss him, whatever, because I'm hiring and firing him then on nonsense. So I would encourage the author who makes that first statement that I agree with you. It is almost to a point where you might as well let it go and let the civil service run the country, which the UK wanted, by the way. I think they managed to do that in Turks and Caicos, and they wanted to do it here as well, but they didn't have their way. But let's just be clear. The one that you control is the politician. That is the one that you should be strengthening and making sure that they can get things done on your behalf. Because when our politicians fail in terms of fulfilling their mandate by you, the public, is you're the one who's the loser.
Yes.
You're the one who's the loser.
Indeed. And certainly to my colleague's point, because he's absolutely 100% correct, the only one that, you can be accountable to or is accountable to you is the elected arm, and that is the one you obviously hold accountable every 4 years. But I will say to you this, that before you can legitimately and reasonably say that your MP, either the one that you elected or as part of the overall government, is somehow failing to perform at the level in which you expect, is if you understand the issues in which they are otherwise failing to address. And that's really, what our job is and what our job has always been. Not to, focus on the personalities in those issues, because that's neither here nor there. Understanding the issues, being educated and aware of what the issues are, where do we want to go, and then what are our expectations of our leaders? Then you are armed with the right information to say, you know what, Mr. MP, you are failing me. You are disappointing me, and here's why. Not just because I don't like how you talk, I don't like how you dress, I don't care, I don't like how you act, because that's just not good enough, frankly.
Yeah, here's what we're doing. We are telling the politicians to go in that kitchen. We know it's hot up inside there, but go in the kitchen and bring me something to eat. And he's going inside there and bringing you something to eat, and then you curse him because it's not served on the right plate. So you had the last administration, and let's use this as an example. Maybe I have to recant it, but let's use it as an example. You had the National, Conservation Council. They feel that the public, once they get a road built, they won't get the east-west arterial. Let's say that that's the reason. I don't know. Nobody really exposed on it. But they are trying to deliver something for you. So they put somebody there that is going to be on the board that can say, we're going east. And then we can accuse them now of putting their cronies on there. Or then we're going to accuse them of being corrupt because we didn't let that little white man get his way when he was saying that I'm the one who's authorized to do it. This is all nonsense. At the end of the day, let me show you something. We're talking about what are you saying is a crony? A crony is someone who's going to follow your instruction. So that means really if the civil servant does his job, which is to follow the dictates in the direction of the politician, then he's a crony too. So we got all these little words that we throw around. But at the end of the day, you are putting someone there to do something on your behalf. Who is he supposed to put on the board? Someone who blatantly refuses, has a completely diametrically opposed position? I don't get that. No, it doesn't work that way. You put in place people that are going to follow your instructions and carry you in the direction you want to go. Go ahead.
Got a caller on the line? Going to the phone lines. Good evening, caller. You're on the air. Oh, nope. Didn't stick around. What is it? 22 minutes past the hour of 6 o'clock is the time. I guess in the few minutes we have remaining, I want to transition away from this discussion that we're having here. I think we, as my colleague would say, have ventilated the issue thoroughly. And again, we, if there's any aspect you don't understand or perhaps need further clarification, well, give us a call. We'd love to hear. Some sad news. Sad news on two fronts. We expected it, though. The Cayman Islands Coast Guard has today said that it has formally suspended the search for missing journalist Andrel Harris. It noted that the decision has been taken as, following more than a week of intensive searches that has spanned some 12.25 square miles of open sea and coastline, they have now formally suspended the search for the missing journalist, but have also added that the police will continue to investigate the matter and obviously follow it wherever the evidence leads. But in a statement that was issued at about 11:35 today, the Coast Guard said, in accordance with the International Aeronautical and Maritime Search and Rescue Manual, the suspension of activity indicates that all reasonable search areas have been thoroughly covered, all available resources have been utilized, and there is no longer a reasonable expectation of locating the missing person alive. Andrel Harris was last reported missing on Wednesday, the 4th of June. And again, land, aerial, and sea searches were carried out, mostly in the area of Pedro St. James, where he was last seen on CCTV footage at around 9:30 p.m. on June 3rd. It is sad news, and certainly we extend our heartfelt condolences to the family and close friends, and certainly the work colleagues who worked with him closely most recently, as well as those of us who knew him over the years. It is a heartbreaking situation, and we pray wherever he is, we pray God's mercy on his soul.
Yeah, absolutely, and it has to be a situation that's very difficult for the family and close friends, especially because there's no real closure there. You know, you don't know what now has happened to the person. So, again, like I said, you know, may God comfort them at this particular point in time.
Absolutely. On the other side, perhaps across the other side of the globe, we are also dealing with news headlines of another catastrophic airline crash.
You know, our minds are the same. I swear to you, I was gonna immediately transition, but I said, Ellio,
no, man,
delay a little bit.
Great minds think alike. We share a brain. That's why we're partners in this thing. Obviously, condolences to the families of the over 245 persons who lost their lives on board Air India, a crash that I don't know whether it's the worst crash in India, but it certainly is terrible. Watching news reports, apparently only one person may have survived that crash. And I just say that because we have a significant Indian population in the Cayman Islands. We cannot assume whether, you know, there are family members or persons you didn't know, but if there are persons within our community who have been emotionally affected, negatively affected by this crash in Air India, then certainly you are in our thoughts and prayers as well. And I encourage our praying community to lift up the people of India and their families, particular the 245 lives who were lost in this crash. Undoubtedly, over the coming weeks, if not months and years, we will learn more as to what was behind this crash. But for now, obviously does not take away the sting of 245 lives being snuffed out due to no fault of their own.
And I think it's unfortunate things like this that can grip everyone because we can easily see it happen. I remember reading a study that had been done. You know, the study basically was saying, why are people responding in such a way, for example, to car accidents, as opposed to the person who had been murdered or knocked down at 3 a.m. in the morning? And it's, in summary, it was people can identify and see it much easier that they could get in a car accident as opposed to being out at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Right.
And in this particular case, there's a lot of people who are flying. We fly on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And when we hear that sort of thing, we're thinking, oh, my God, thank God I wasn't on that plane. Thank God my family wasn't on that plane. And, you know, and then, of course, we can turn and say, what if I was the family member?
Yes. There's certainly somebody's family members was on that plane. And if those family members are connected to the people in the Cayman Islands and our Indian diaspora, then again, our thoughts and prayers go out to you. Not wanting to end on a solemn note, however, with 1:40 remaining, I just want to take the opportunity again to remind you, as we began, tomorrow at 5 o'clock, we are going to have Miss World Cayman Islands, Jada Ramon, as our guest. She will show up in studios about 5 o'clock, and we are going to talk about her historic journey and participation in the Miss World India pageant. We want you to be a part of that as well. Another bit of good news.
Yeah, I'm going to just do the quick news announcement again. Just want to encourage persons, Mr. Joey Ebanks, again on the evangelism. June 12th is what today is. Old Man Bay in Northside, 7:30 to 8:30. That is Northside, 7:30, 8:30, Old Man Bay.
Indeed. Well, certainly thank you to those who tuned in. We got about 45 seconds remaining and not enough time to take any calls, not enough time to do anything else other than to thank our listeners for tuning in.
Yep.
Thank those callers and contributors who shared their comments.
Much appreciated.
Much appreciated. And be sure to join us as we round off yet again another exciting week here on Straight Talk by tuning in tomorrow at 4 o'clock until 6:30, where at 5 o'clock we will host Miss World Cayman Islands. That's all the time we have for you for today. 27 seconds remaining. Ellio, any final closing remarks?
All I want to say is, again, especially to all those persons who are listening, and even more so those who take the time out to make a little bit of a contribution, we really, really appreciate it. You make this discussion great. Make sure and tune in tomorrow right here on Straight talk.
That's right. On your channel, 103.1 FM. We'll see you tomorrow at 4:30. Good night, K-Man.
The home of the BBC.